What is going on, guys? Welcome to part 2 of my Call of Duty World War II campaign video right here on BlackTideTV. If you missed the first part, I will link it in the description down below. That was a much longer video, much more focused on the actual review, an overdue review of Call of Duty World War II campaign, how the campaign plays, the story, all of the tropes that it follows. So if you're interested in that, I will have it linked in the description down below. Today we're talking about the one thing I couldn't fit into that video, which was the things that they couldn't fit, ironically, into multiplayer. So every year with Call of Duty, there are some vast differences between the campaign modes, zombie modes, and multiplayer modes. But most specifically, campaign and multiplayer, they're usually fairly similar. Unfortunately, campaign sometimes takes some things and they change them around from the multiplayer. You'll have, for example, the IMR assault rifle in Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. It's fully automatic in the campaign, and it's one of the most prominent weapons that you have throughout the entirety of the game. You're always given the IMR, the assault rifle that prints bullets into the magazine, and it's fully automatic, and it feels amazing. And then you get in multiplayer, and it's a 4-round burst, I believe it was, and it was like, this is not my IMR, hashtag not my IMR. But every year, Call of Duty changes things up between the campaign and the multiplayer, and I'd like to point out some of the things that bothered me the most after finally playing through the campaign of Call of Duty World War II, what they skipped out on for the multiplayer, because there are some great things that could have made it into multiplayer. Some of them they've actually implemented into multiplayer thus far. It took them a while to get some of these things into the game, most specifically weapons and certain attachments, which we'll run through first. And then I have two major complaints. My two biggest ones will hit just after the quick rundown. But today's superpower shoutout of the day goes out to Takeout Fur, one of my latest joiners to the Discord. So check out the BlackTideTV official Discord with the link in the description down below. But without further ado, the smaller items that didn't make it immediately into multiplayer, suppressed pistols. For the longest time in multiplayer, suppressors were exclusive to the Airborne Division and on submachine guns. Recently, they've made an update and you can now use suppressors on a few different weapons. I think it's still SMGs and pistols. There are some weapons, like there's a very special sniper rifle that has a suppressor on as well. But in terms of other weapons, I think it's just the submachine guns and pistols. But in the campaign mode, suppressed pistols feature very prominently. You have a lot of certain stealth missions where you'll have a suppressed pistol in your hands. Similarly, iron sights on sniper rifles, specifically the carabin sniper rifle. This weapon is iron sighted throughout the entire game. If you are seeing a carabin on the ground and you pick that carabin up, it will come default with iron sights. And for the longest time in multiplayer, you could only have iron sights on the Kar 98K, which was strange. And admittedly, there is an iron sight Kar 98K in the campaign, and almost every single enemy carries one, so it's very, very widespread and you will see that weapon a lot. But there are other iron sight sniper rifles in the campaign that didn't make it into multiplayer until very, very recently. They only just added in iron sight sniper rifles recently, and now of course you can get iron sights on any sniper rifle in the game. But the carabin specifically feels amazing with an iron sight, so I haven't yet unlocked it in multiplayer because I haven't been using the weapon, admittedly. But in campaign mode, the iron sight carabin is one of the smoothest weapons, and I can only imagine how amazing it feels in multiplayer as well. So definitely check that one out if you are ranking up through your sniper rifles. Maybe you've thrown the carabin aside like I have. It was probably my least favorite sniper in the game for the longest time. The semi-autos usually are, but it's pretty decent with iron sights. So check that out now that we can use iron sights on sniper rifles in multiplayer. Another attachment, the last attachment that we'll be bringing up, is the rifle grenade. Grenade launchers, noob tubes. They were in the campaign, the very first mission, I believe, D-Day. You can pick up an M1 Garand with a rifle grenade. And rifle grenades only, again, recently were added to multiplayer within like the last month or two. So when the big update came out for Sledgehammer Games and for World War II, when they ousted Michael Condrey, Glenn Schofield, there's a whole bunch of new heads at Sledgehammer Games. They introduced a lot of these really cool things that were in campaign that never made it to multiplayer, and I'm really glad that they did that. They should have been in there from day one, but unfortunately this is what we've had to deal with. So those are some of the attachments. Now let's specifically talk about weapons. There are only two major weapons that come to mind when it comes to campaign versus multiplayer and weapons not being included in multiplayer. The first being the Enfield No. 2, which of course is one of those new revolvers that was added a few months ago to multiplayer as a DLC weapon alongside the Reich's revolver. The Enfield No. 2 features in a single campaign mission when one of your commanding officers dies. He hands off an Enfield No. 2 to you, and you can use it for a very, very brief on-rails segment before handing it off to another character and never seeing that weapon again in the game. So it was only featured a little tiny bit in the campaign, but it was in the campaign from day one and never made it to multiplayer until much, much later. And then much, much later, it was a DLC weapon. So it's kind of crazy that it's a DLC weapon. It would have been really fun if maybe, because it's such a special weapon for the campaign itself, if maybe you finished the campaign and it unlocked it in multiplayer. That would be a cool idea, a cool method going forward for unlocking weapons to really make you want to play different modes. I know there's no campaign in Black Ops 4, but maybe if you play Battle Royale, you'll get access to a new weapon in multiplayer. Maybe if you play Zombies, you'll get access to a different weapon in multiplayer, because that's something that they missed out on here with the Enfield No. 2. And there's finally one more weapon that I'd like to bring up, and that is the M1919 LMG. I think it's like a Johnson or M1919 Browning M1919. It's one of those massive, massive light machine guns, and it's almost always found in the campaign mounted up in a windowsill or on a ledge, and you can use it, you can mount it and use it as a mounted LMG, but you can also rip it off the mount and run around with it. But once you swap weapons, you just drop that LMG on the ground and you can't pick it up again. So the M1919, it's a very slow firing weapon, very deliberate, 2-shot kill, I believe, in the campaign. It's very, very powerful. And I really feel like the Stinger LMG that they recently added to multiplayer is something similar, something very, very like the M1919 from campaign, but I'm not entirely certain. I haven't used the Stinger a lot myself in multiplayer, so I can't quite put my finger on it, but the Stinger and the M1919, they're very similar. I'm not sure if they're the same. Likewise, we should still have the M1919 in multiplayer. Should have been in there from day one. If it's in campaign, in my mind, it should be in multiplayer as well. And that goes for my last two, and the big two that I'd like to bring up. Manual healing, which they are bringing to multiplayer in Call of Duty Black Ops 4. Now, that doesn't make as much sense to me because Black Ops 4, we're in the future, right? Black Ops 4, it's more believable if you have regenerative health. In the future, you might have stim packs or like something that's integrated into your body armor that shoots you full of adrenaline whenever you're taking damage, and it pumps you up and puts you back in the fight. Like, that is much more believable for a future setting than it is for a past setting where we still have regenerative health in multiplayer for Call of Duty World War II, but this was one of the first campaign modes that we've had in a long, long time, where you had to heal manually by using a med kit, and you have to scavenge these med kits, and it really made the gameplay very slow and deliberate, especially on veteran mode, which is of course what you're seeing in the gameplay today. I'm playing through veteran playthrough now, and I'm really, really enjoying it. Again, check out that full review of the game. I've talked about veteran mode and that's linked in the description down below, but manual healing, it just feels right in a Call of Duty World War II game, and it would have been the right time for the multiplayer to introduce that manual healing and using medkits in multiplayer in this game rather than Black Ops 4. I feel like it's much more suited to the setting. The final thing that I'd like to bring up is leaning. And leaning has been something of a sore subject in the Call of Duty community. We had leaning in the Call of Duty Ghosts multiplayer. That was the only place that it has ever appeared. I believe it returned in Infinite Warfare campaign. I could be wrong there, but I do remember playing another campaign and having the leaning effect available. But here in Call of Duty World War II, those leaning mechanics are front and center in full force and are almost mandatory for survival, especially in veteran game modes. I'm really upset these mechanics didn't make it to multiplayer because these are some of the best, most intuitive leaning mechanics that I've seen in a multiplayer first-person shooter in a really long time. Yes, Call of Duty Ghost leaning mechanics weren't fantastic, and leaning in first-person shooters is generally frowned upon because it's so edgy. Sometimes you want to lean and it won't let you lean, sometimes you don't want to lean and you end up leaning, but here it's really smart. It's very well implemented. You approach a waist-high or object with a corner, and it automatically gives you those visual cues with the way your weapon sways to let you know, hey, you can lean here. The leaning is optimal in that you can change the direction and angle of your lean by moving your analog sticks. You can completely shift the way that you're leaning. If you're on a waist-high object, you can look around left, around right, over the top, all in one continuous motion. The leaning is fantastic in Call of Duty World War II campaign, and it should have made it to multiplayer because World War II is the place that you would want those leaning mechanics. Ghost was very fast-paced and kind of futuristic in its own right, so the leaning mechanics didn't necessarily work too well there. But here in World War II, it's a lot more realistic, a lot more idealistic to hide around a corner and lean out and shoot at enemies. And there's a lot of really great spots in the multiplayer maps themselves that this mechanic almost seems like it was put in the game originally, and then they thought, maybe we shouldn't do that because Call of Duty Ghosts did it poorly. But this game, it's a completely different scenario with the leaning, and I definitely advise you check out the campaign and try out the leaning mechanics. Try them in Veteran, because in Veteran, you're almost guaranteed to have to lean if you want to kill anybody. Like, you can't just run down the middle of the road and expect to survive. So the leaning mechanics go a long way there. Those are some of the things that didn't make it into multiplayer from the Call of Duty World War II campaign. Is there anything that I missed? Let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think about all these things? I really wish they had been implemented from day one in the multiplayer. I don't think we'll ever see leaning or manual healing make its way in, but maybe in a special weekly weekend warfare or game mode, maybe? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.